It's so easy to say something bad about EA, but if any publisher was ever going to capitalise on the success of microtransactions in MMOs, it was going to be them. Secret World Legends is advertised as a unique story-driven action MMORPG of the likes you've never seen before, set in the modern day in which the world is plunged into a war with Lovecraft's reject pile. Secret World not only seems to be a secret to the NPCs living in the unaffected areas, but also a secret to us real people, to which it's so secret that the peak player base is usually around 55 people, and at the time of recording, it's only 9:30 on a Thursday night, so it isn't exactly on sociable hours. This barely grasping to its last ounce of sanity of a game is developed and published entirely by Funcom, who have made titles such as Championship Motocross featuring Ricky Carmichael, Championship Motocross 2001 featuring Ricky Carmichael, and of course Championship Pony for the DS, also featuring Ricky Carmichael as horse. But when they weren't goofing around with Ricky Carmichael, they have games that are still quite active today, such as two big Conan games, Age of and Exiles. Oh, and they're also apparently working on a Dune MMO. So they aren't exactly doing bad for themselves. I mean, they have had a license to make a Lego game at one point. It was called Lego Minifigures Online. Can't say I've ever heard of it, but it's a Lego MMO and yeah, it looks okay. It just looks like any other Lego game. But back to the topic at hand. Now, supposedly, this little venture cost Funcom $52 million, and according to GamesIndustry.biz, Funcom's Secret World had only actually sold 200,000 copies since its launch in June. This article was actually written in August. But interestingly, according to the article, the game had double the amount of players that had signed up for the beta. I can imagine that was pretty fucking worrying for the people working on the game at this time. Funcom interestingly blamed the launches of Diablo 3 and Guild Wars 2 on the disappointing sales. But listen here, right? I was there. I remember the Diablo 3 servers. I also remember the huge fucking security breach that plagued Guild Wars 2, and loads of people had their accounts compromised, including my own. So personally, I don't think it is the fault of their choice of release dates, but in fact that a lot of people had clearly made their mind up about the game in the beta. In fact, everything went so well for Funcom after the release of Secret World that they did what all completely okay, all is fine companies do. They reduced their operational costs, which included layoffs, which makes you wonder how exactly did they bounce back. It states that they had started work on the Lego game at the time of this article, so maybe Lego had given them enough of a check to be able to pull something back. They did end up releasing some Secret World spin-off games, including an incredibly stereotypical looking horror game channel bait called The Park, alongside Hide and Shriek, which was a 1v1 PvP game, and that game also went free to play a year after release. Also, I can't lie, but when I was doing research, I kept reading it as Hide and Shrek, and just thought that they had some sort of license from DreamWorks. And let's be real, there probably is an indie horror game out there called Hide and Shrek. If not, please don't. There's also supposedly a TV show coming for it, but I think honestly that is probably about as dead as the game itself. It's quite insane how many times they've tried to force the Secret World universe to work, and don't get me wrong, look, it's a cool universe. As I said, you can't go wrong with Lovecraft, but fuck man, maybe you've all been hanging around too much of this eldritch shit, because this is becoming the epitome of the phrase insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different fucking results. The fucking is definitely in the original quote. Oh, and also there was a tabletop game, which was made by Star Anvil Studios, who seem to have only ever made 2 other games. A bit of an interesting side note on that though, it looks like they got funded on Kickstarter for 150k when their original goal was actually only 40, and they posted it onto another site, which also met its goal, getting 150k of 40. Interestingly, there are the exact same numbers. That's weird as fuck. Did they just put the money in themselves? Unfortunately, you can't see the full details of Backer Kit. I'm guessing it's just because it was an old project. It hasn't released yet, but apparently it has been added to a list of nominees for the most anticipated RPG of 2024. So yeah, I guess maybe they will release it one day. And it's been about 2 years since the original project went up on Kickstarter. I don't know how long it typically takes to make a board game, but I'm assuming they already had everything fleshed out by the time they were hitting the Kickstarter. But fuck knows, I hope they do well. But let's jump back to the game, shall we? Okay, so I want to start this part of the video off with a little bit of a disclaimer. I wasn't sure if I was even going to make this into a video. My time with Secret World wasn't exactly what I'd call enjoyable, but I'll explain exactly why throughout. I originally had the idea to just make this into a quick YouTube short, but I think I wanted to get these thoughts out there, so if you're even hoping for a mildly positive, hell even a more middle ground neutral stance on this game, that isn't what you're about to get. And I understand if you don't want to stick around for my incoming rant about this. So immediately when you start it, it feels incredibly outdated. It's weird, overall it just feels pretty low budget on first glance. But clearly it absolutely isn't, given how much was lost on it. I will say though, it's very interesting getting a modern day sort of real world setting for an MMO, and I have to give Secret World credit for that. It feels fantastical enough that you aren't immediately just like, great, this is just real life. However, I don't know if I want to see fucking Royal Mail post boxes. Kind of brings you back to reality a little bit. So you're ready to make your character? Well, hold your bloody horses, mate. You've got to make your choice of faction that you'd like to join first. These factions are the Illuminati, the Dragon, or the Templars, which are your standard British, as it going duck, male muckers kind of faction. All of which have their own little intro video that you can watch, and to give them some credit, doesn't open your browser, but it actually opens in-game. This is what peak innovation looks like, fellas, and also what it looks like to spend 50 million on a game. By the way, there's a web browser in this game, and no, sites aren't blocked. Creating your character is when things actually start to get interesting. It honestly feels and looks like The Sims. Like, I just couldn't get it out of my head. I'm sure some of the assets are just straight flipped from there, and it wouldn't exactly be a shock, as EA had a massive hand in the game itself. The character creation also reminds me a hell of a lot of a game that I regrettably rushed out to purchase on release called All Points Bulletin, a game that, for better or for worse, was pretty much dead on arrival. But it is somehow still alive today, even in the light of GTA Online making the whole thing redundant. After creating your character, you get the choice of classes. Interestingly, they're all available from start, which is actually really good. I'm glad that you don't have to pay for any of the classes. And not only that, there's actually 9 for you to pick from, which all have their unique little quirks, and really these aren't like classes in their traditional sense. As you progress, you can unlock other weapons, and all their abilities giving you a relatively boundless experience. Somewhat like RuneScape or New World, I personally went for the Punisher build for the shotgun and hammer wombo combo, especially as they're more tanky weapons, and I didn't really anticipate seeing many people to group with, and spoiler, there wasn't. But the classes all start with combos of weapons, and you aren't bound to any set selection, and you can eventually unlock everything, so you don't really need to worry too much about your starting choice. It's after this you're dropped into cutscenes, setting the scene for you in which your character is seen having a nice little sleepy snack, which gives you the absolute worst heartburn, making your character regret every life decision that didn't involve buying Gaviscon. Something that I think is genuinely a great feature of this game are the cutscenes. There are a lot of them, for most quests in fact, and a lot of work had clearly gone into ensuring that the story was as immersive as it could be, and something that, especially for the time, wasn't really the norm. In fact, it isn't even the norm now in MMOs, so I think they did a pretty good job on this. Do I think they did $50 million worth of a good job? No I don't, because that's just fucking insane. But after your character has fought for their lives like they've just eaten some suspiciously warm and sweaty gas station sushi, you end up having what I can only describe as a fever dream. Your bedroom now leads to a cemetery, which, let's be completely real here, edgy goth teenager me would have been like, whoa, sick dude, but that's pretty much who I still am. So, whoa, sick dude. This is when you get your first glimpse of the UI. And something quite nice, and must give a bit of credit to Funcom for. You don't immediately get a pop-up telling you about a shop or the sub, or any of that shit. It's nice. It's really crap that this is something to praise a dev for, but here we are. But you know what? On that note, I'm going to hit the monetization early in this video, because, of course, there's a lot to go over. And where do I start? Well, of course, this game has a subscription service, and supposedly, until 2016, they were actually selling lifetime subscriptions, which, god damn, I would hate to be one of the people that got it. But when you are a member though, they get all the usual stuff: bonus XP, bonus currency, nerfed cooldowns on lockouts, repeat missions, free teleports, and loyalty rewards based on days purchased, which I can't actually find any further information on this. It just seems like if you try and look for any of these rewards, there just doesn't seem to be much on the internet about it. They also have their own currency that you can buy to exchange for auction house tokens, which, you guessed it, you can buy stuff on the auction house with. You can get both of these in-game still, but you can also buy both of them. And pretty much any sort of currency that I came across, you could buy. I mean, even skill points, which just, again, seems absolutely wild to me that you'd even want to. Surely learning your class is better than just skipping to the end of it to then have essentially a single-player experience because there's no one else playing this. And it was around this time that I was looking at what they had to offer in the main city. Now, there were actually a couple of people here, and it felt like I was just looking at Second Life screenshots rather than playing Secret World. The fashion in the game is something to be desired. It's very mall goth, it's very 14 years old playing Second Life and sat in a goth club all day. Well, but whilst I was looking at all these lovely characters that people have made, and I'm not entirely sure if they've just purchased their outfits, but I'm not going to judge, it was when I got my first pop-up ad.
How to generate rage.
I'm pretty sure universally pop-up ads are hated, and obviously we're not in a time where they're as rife as they were in the 2000s, but Jesus Christ, what a shit way to try and get me to join the subscription. And this isn't even the only time it happens. Like, I don't mind if an MMO, especially a free-to-play one, wants to try and get me to subscribe when I'm first logged into the game or even when I'm just about to log out, but middle of the session is just fucking weird. And I get they've got to make their money, but it always comes down to the same thing, doesn't it? Make a good game and you won't have to rely on these things. Let's talk about the quests in Secret World, or missions as they're known. And they have several different types of missions, including story, dungeon, raid, scenario, action, sabotage, investigation, side, and PvP missions. One of the things I do love about the missions though is that you don't need to return to quest givers for the most part, as you have a phone and can complete from anywhere, which, I'm going to be real here, I'd enjoy it a little bit more if there was also an option to just ring to pick up new quests from people you've already interacted with. But I guess that also stops you from turning the pace of the game into a steamroll. However, what I did notice, when you first go to the first quest hub, you come across this guy in a tent who says he's on watch, and there's a lot of fucking zombies around him, which I'm kind of surprised they aren't killing him, seeing as he literally is talking about how everybody else in the village is just getting absolutely wrecked by these things just by existing, but he's on the side of a road in a tent and they're somehow okay. This is some absolute nuclear bullshit level of plot armor. But so here's the thing, right? You talk to him, you do his first quest, you go all the way over to the main town, you do a couple of quests there, and then you have to go all the way back to him, and then he says to you, oh yeah, now kill these zombies. And I just don't understand why this is here, because this is acting as if you haven't already just had to run through all of these and thought about 18 packs of them. So why not fucking do this in the first place? But in general, you do have to put a little bit of thought into your missions, which honestly is such a travesty. How dare an MMO developer make me read? Reading is for losers and bozos, which I can say as a guy who is sat making videos about MMOs on a Thursday evening that I am clearly of the alpha Chad variety and my chin is so strong it'll knock 7 shades of shit out of you and your entire goddamn family just by looking at it. But knowing your missions is actually quite important in Secret World. Being told specific details to a mission in the cutscenes and even having to research where you're having to go, like in this CCTV mission in which you have to check a phone book for companies to go check out and their addresses. The story mission itself, not much unlike the MSQ from Final Fantasy. There are certain requirements that have to be met before progressing at certain points, but that is where all the other side missions come into play.
Why are you running?
Let's talk about the main story. The bug? The lights coming out your character? Well, guess what? You, yes, you, specifically, Alex, you have been given the opportunity to survive the end times. Well done, you lad. Well done. Awakened with magical powers, you're indoctrinated, as I said, into the one of 3 agencies, Templars in London, the Illuminati in Brooklyn, or the Dragons in Seoul. But before then, you have a tutorial level, which introduces you to a lot of mechanics of the game, and your first glimpse into the general atmosphere, which, for the most part, is genuinely quite nice and spooky. The tutorial introduces you to puzzles, proximity mines, keypads, which, by the way, you can't type in on your numpad, which is an absolute travesty, 52 million, by the way. Not so great sound design, and even more questionable voice acting.
Something's coming out of the ground.
Go now!
Sorry, can't let you through without authorization. Look, I don't know what that's supposed to be, but it's not.
All right, lads, D.I. Shelley. They're with me.
Good afternoon. Are you... From the look of things, I guess that question is moot.
You're thrust into what looked like it was going to be such a cool fight, but frame rate says otherwise. This is something that we'll discuss later, and you seem to pass out a lot, and I'm I'm pretty sure that's not very good for you to be unconscious so many times in such a short time frame.
Good afternoon.
Once you've completed this bit, you get to go to your agency. I, of course, went with the British because it's always nice to see a game that features places in your own country. To which, when I first arrive at the Templars hub, I'm immediately told how much of a manlet I am.
Aren't you a little bit short to be in the Templars?
And because of that I can't join the Templars. I'm literally taller than every NPC that's telling me I'm too small. What the fuck? And after travelling to your base and choosing your weapons, you're sent to the first of several supernatural disaster zones around the world. Also, can I just point out how fucking weird the mouth animations are in this game? The game itself obviously has so many references to Lovecraft, Poe, Stephen King and other horror writers. You've got things like the Overlook Motel, Flag's Pharmacy, Jack and Wendy's Bed and Breakfast, and you get the picture. It's at this point that all the spooky guys have appeared, along with some ancient Mayan invaders, revealing an ancient war over some mountain and some filth. That's literally what they call it. It's basically ancient old god bathwater, and it corrupts those who come close. Your own story surrounds a new age cult that want to give the old gods a little snack. You know, just a little one, just a little treat for putting away the dishes or some shit. I mean, I don't know why you'd even want to give a treat to an old god, especially not when you're the fucking treat. And once you've been given your weapon, you'll start to unlock the specialities that come with active abilities, which is basically just talents for the weapons. If you think in a sense how most typical RPGs like Elder Scrolls handles their weapon training, and once you've purchased all of the active abilities for a specific weapon, you'll gain access to the capstones for further stat increases. Something that I think is quite interesting with New World. For fuck's sake, I can't count how many times I've actually almost said New World or written New World in the script for this video. Something I think that is quite interesting is gear empowerment. You feed your useless weapons to your main one that you're building, however you can only feed the same type of weapon or other gear types to the upgrade. There is also gear fusion, which I didn't use, mainly because I didn't upgrade a weapon to level 20, and what this does is use the same rarity item to combine the items to become a higher quality. And this brings me swiftly onto one of the things I quite dislike about this game already, and it's the fusing. I feel like one of the most important aspects of MMO is how your gear changes and evolves over time, and just typically sticking with the same bits because you've upgraded an item a lot doesn't really make any sense to swap. You're typically going to be sticking with the same weapons because you've already upgraded something X amount of times, and there's not much benefit in changing to the new one. Or maybe I've just completely misunderstood how that works and it's actually really fucking good and I'm an idiot, which is probably the more likely scenario. And speaking of weapons, how does combat actually feel? Do you think it's going to feel like you've got an absolute jackhammer of a shotgun that sounds like a Space Marine bolter going through a megaphone with a satisfying meaty thump? Yeah, it doesn't sound great. It doesn't even really play too great either. You don't really aim your guns, which kind of sucks. And combat just feels pretty meaningless. You can easily take down massive packs of zombies without even bothering to dodge their attacks, and they even took down a level 7 with relative ease at level 3. Not to mention that they've taken some inspiration from what I can only assume is Left 4 Dead with these cars here. If you stand on them or shoot at them, their alarms will go off, alerting some zombies to it. Do you think it'll be quite a few zombies? Do you? Do you think it'll attract the zombies around your area that you can currently see? Did you think that, did you? You dumb bitch. No, a small pack spawns in and that's it. And this, along with everything else that I've already said, is one of the many other disappointments that is Secret World. But the biggest disappointment in this entire thing is how awful Funcom's system of downloading is. So let me set the scene here. You've just got through your tutorial and you're ready to go to the new area. And then you notice this little cog in the top. You think, what's that? Maybe you don't worry too much about it. It's just a little cog. But then your game starts lagging. Then you start getting 5 frames a second. And that's where you realise that when you go to a new area, you'll start to download the game whilst playing the game. And people have been complaining about this pretty much since the game came out. Even my notes descended into a rant. In fact, this is exactly what I've written down. Why the hell did you decide to use this method of download? And not just when the game boots have everything fucking downloaded as one, and not slowly filtered like this. It is so dumb. How could they be so fucking dumb to do this? It must have alienated so many people with bad internet on release. I left my game on overnight, just downloading, and it still hadn't done 15 hours later. I changed to full client mode, it didn't do shit, and in the end I re-downloaded everything, stuck it in full client mode, and that seemed to sort a bit of it, but it still had issues later on down the line. And it's just absolutely insane to me that you can't download everything just direct through the launcher. No doubt there's probably ways to download the files separately, but you shouldn't have to do that. In no world should you have to do that. And especially not in this bloody secret one. I already hate making that joke. I just don't understand how anyone can think it's a good idea. I'd rather sacrifice the drive space than my time trying to persevere through the lag. But back to the game itself. I did notice that NPCs don't always react when you click in on them, which, I've got to be real, it seems like a very weird oversight to have, given all the other interactions with them and all the time and effort that's gone into all the cutscenes and the voice acting. You know, it's about this point in my notes in which I wrote the line, "For a game that is made by someone with fun in their name, it's very clear that my idea of fun is very different to theirs." And honestly, I've really found myself struggling to enjoy this. I even had doubts about even making this video because of how negatively I feel about this game. However, I have to be true to my own honest opinions rather than trying to polish this turd, but I just don't feel like this is some sort of golden nugget of shit in an ever-expanding sewer of normal shit, with shit apples and shit hawks and all the other shit-related things. But you know what? Here's my hot take. I don't think Secret World should be a multiplayer game. I think that this is a massive wasted opportunity, and 52 million lost on something that just didn't meet up to what they wanted to achieve is just insane. I know that a lot of games, and especially MMOs, can be such a money sink and can absolutely cripple and ruin a company. But imagine if they put all that time, money and effort into making an incredible single player RPG out of this. And let's be real, there isn't exactly a lot of genuinely good Lovecraftian games out there, let alone Lovecraftian RPG games, and especially not in the early 2010s. And I just feel like overall it's just completely missed its mark. Whether or not it also meant they would have had the backing of EA as a publisher, who knows. But if they had, then imagine if this was also made by BioWare. It could have been a sort of Lovecraftian Mass Effect. And I think I would have preferred that over what they've given us. But of course there is also a lot of people out there who did enjoy the game, and that is also fine. Now obviously I didn't actually play the original Secret World, because Secret World's Legends is a reboot. But I'm also not shitting on anybody for getting their enjoyment out of this game. I can see the little bits there that could be fantastic. And you know what? It's free. And I envy these people. I genuinely do. There's a lot of people out there who praise this game no end for how spectacular its story is. I wish I could share the joy and passion that these people have for this, but ultimately I just can't. I feel like the time that I put into playing the game just wasn't worthwhile, and it just didn't click with me. And that's okay. Not everything has to click with you. Not everything has to be good in your own opinion, and that's fine. But here it is. Here's my last note. Honestly, the last thing I wanted to do was quit. I've really forced myself to stick it out this far, but I can safely say that Secret World just isn't for me. I really wish it was. I love the atmosphere and even some bits of the story, but the game itself is just in need of such a complete rework. For an MMO of its time, I actually feel like it was quite a step back. And I think if it was made today, it would be more like Fallout 76 or The Division, and that wouldn't even be a bad thing.